Senator from Florida is recognized.
Mr. President, the nominees that I will discuss today were approved by the Armed Services Committee with bipartisan support. Republican and Democrats agreed that they are qualified and ready to serve. President Trump was elected in a landslide, and the American people expect and deserve our support in getting his agenda accomplished. President Trump and his administration are working incredibly hard to bring back the United States policy of peace through strength, and to ensure our military is a respected and lethal fighting force. This is not an easy task after President Biden's weakness allowed our enemies free rein while our military leadership was distracted with being woke. President Trump needs his full team in place to deliver on his agenda to restore our nation's military to focus on the warfighter. To that end, I ask that we move to consider the following nominees. First, I'll ask that we consider Dale Marks to be an Assistant Secretary of Defense. Mr. Marks is a former fighter pilot and combat wounded veteran. After his distinguished military career, he continued service in a civilian capacity, where he rose to the ranks of the Senior Executive Service. He is currently serving as the Executive Director of the 96th Test Wing Air Force Material Command at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. The position he is nominated for is essential to ensure that our military installations remain strong, our energy policies support mission success, and our environmental strategies enhance, not hinder, operational readiness and support peace through strength. I urge the Democrats to drop their misplaced stall tactics and allow for his immediate confirmation. I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nomination. Executive Calendar number 109, Dale Marks to be an Assistant Secretary of Defense. That the Senate vote on the nomination without intervening action or debate. The motion to consider be considered made and laid upon the table. That the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action and the Senate resume legislative session.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
The Senator from Connecticut is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Reserving the right to object, I appreciate my colleague from Florida asking for a competent team of professionals at the Department of Defense. We all want the Department of Defense to be managed efficiently and effectively. It's vital to our national security. What we have right now is chaos, literally confusion, turmoil, turbulence, in part because we have a Department of Defense that is unaccountable. Last Congress, I led a bicameral letter to then Secretary Austin demanding answers after a GAO report found significant failures in barracks facilities across the country. Billions of dollars have been poured into installations for housing and infrastructure improvements. But again, those investments are being undercut by the mass layoffs we see right now at the Department of Defense. We expect Mr. Marks to manage the entirety of the installations and environmental programs at DoD, but the administration, in effect, is undercutting him at every turn. This Secretary of Defense has created that chaos. He's shredded the department's report on climate change, despite it outlining the serious implications it will have on the military in the coming decade. I wonder whether the Secretary has actually visited Guam or Alaska and seen the effects of climate change in either place. I wonder whether he understands the equipment, the electronics, the ammunition that are required and that themselves require special storage and resilient infrastructure if we expect them to perform in combat effectively. As climate change creates more challenging environments for our warfighters, the DoD should be leading the charge in research and adaptability. I feel especially strongly that the DoD, in firing its scientists and throwing research in the trash, is betraying the values and principles that the Secretary ought to be fighting to uphold. Mr. Marks will be responsible for all of it, yet the Secretary hasn't the slightest idea of what he is doing in these areas. We questioned him for more than 4 hours during his hearing at the Armed Services Committee, that is the Secretary, and we all knew that he was the least qualified Secretary of Defense in our history. And 4 months later, sadly, unfortunately, we can say confidently, we were right. What he is doing in slashing personnel, the experts, the scientists, is the reason that I stand here and say that we cannot accept Mr. Marks shortcutting the proper process that provides for debate on all these issues, and therefore I object.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President,
Senator from Florida.
I'm not sure I understand my colleague's objection. These are well-qualified nominees. They enjoy bipartisan support. There are several more nominees waiting. But it's obvious. My colleagues across the aisle will do everything they can to undermine President Trump's agenda and delay these nominees. Next, I would like to consider Keith Bass to be an Assistant Secretary of Defense. Mr. Bass, a retired U.S. Navy commander, is also a member of the American College of Healthcare Executives, the National Rehabilitation Association, the American Counseling Association, the National Association of Alcoholism and Drug Abuse Counselors. Prior to nomination, Mr. Bass served as Medical Center Director for the West Texas VA healthcare system. The role Mr. Bass has been nominated to oversees a military health system, has 9.6 million beneficiaries entitled to care. The military health system is currently undergoing many reforms to improve efficiency, increase readiness, and deliver better care. I urge my colleagues to allow for his immediate confirmation. I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nomination. Executive Calendar 70, Keith Bass to be an Assistant Secretary of Defense, that the Senate vote on the nomination without intervening action or debate. The motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action and the Senate resume legislative session.
Is there objection?
Mr. President,
Senator from Connecticut.
reserving the right to object, I once again agree with my colleague from Florida. We have worked together in a bipartisan way for years now, and I appreciate his leadership on the Spar subcommittee where we share a number of interests. I fear that the chaos at the Department of Defense, due to the slashing of positions, the confusion caused by ideological interventions that are harmful, reckless, and unnecessary, that those kinds of downsides and defects in leadership will hurt the military families, and in particular their access to health care. TRICARE provides for the well-being of our service members, their families, and loved ones. Mr. Bass has a long service record, but this administration is undercutting his potential work, and we deserve to debate it on the floor of the Senate without unanimous consent, without shortcutting public accountability. The administration now in charge of the Department of Defense should be held accountable for exactly the health care interests that Mr. Bass will have responsibility for advancing, and therefore I object.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President,
Senator from Florida.
the President deserves his national security nominees today, so let's see if we'll consider this one. Brandon Williams to be Undersecretary for Nuclear Security, Military Health System. Mr. Williams is a former nuclear submarine officer. During his service, he made 6 strategic deterrence patrols. As a strategic military officer, was a nuclear weapons safety officer, nuclear weapons security officer, and nuclear weapons radiological control officer. Pretty competent. This role is responsible for the maintenance of a safe, secure, and reliable nuclear stockpile. Confirmation is critical to President Trump's peace through strength and strategic deterrence agenda. Hopefully my colleague will see the wisdom in allowing this confirmation, this individual who's clearly qualified to be confirmed today. I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nomination. Executive Calendar number 107, Brandon Williams to be Undersecretary for Nuclear Security, that the Senate be to vote on the nomination without intervening action or debate. The motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action and the Senate resume legislative session.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
The senator from Connecticut is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. On this one, I think the stakes are particularly high. At the Department of Energy, the Musk cuts led to hundreds of employees being fired. They were responsible for overseeing our nuclear weapons stockpile. That set of moves caused a massive counterintelligence disaster and a logistical train wreck. After realizing these employees were indispensable, the agency begged for them to come back. Billions of dollars have been poured into this program, and what we have seen now is the whirlwind, the confusion and chaos caused by this mismanagement. We need full accountability. We need more facts, which we have been denied. Our Armed Services Committee, along with other committees, should be looking into what the consequences were of those DOGE slashing and trashing steps that put our nation in jeopardy. We're not going to have it if we proceed to this nomination with unanimous consent, shortcutting public debate, and therefore I object.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President,
The senator from Florida is recognized.
one final chance. I hope my colleagues can agree that we have at least one critical nominee today approved. So let's consider Bradley Hansel to be Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. Mr. Hansel is a former Green Beret, Senior Director on the National Security Council staff, and has previously received bipartisan support. He will be responsible to exercise the Secretary of Defense authority, direction, and control over DIA, NGA, NSA, NRO, and the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. His confirmation is critical to the President's Peace Through Strength agenda. I once again urge my colleague to allow for the nominee's immediate confirmation. I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nomination. Executive calendar number 108, Bradley Hansel to be Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. That the Senate vote on the nomination without intervening action or debate. The motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table. That the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action and the Senate resume legislative session.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
The senator from Connecticut is recognized.
I wish I could agree to unanimous consent on this nominee. And as my colleague from Florida obviously understands, the issues here are bigger than any one of these nominees. The issues are more consequential than the careers or advancement of any single member of the Department of Defense team. This secretary seems more concerned with his own public image than the safety of our service members, because he has violated basic security protocols. We're talking here about an official who will be responsible for securing our national intelligence. When this secretary, in effect, has jeopardized them through actions that are currently under investigation. How is the person responsible for the Office of Intelligence and Security at the Department of Defense supposed to do their job when they face the most serious counterintelligence threat in recent memory from within the Department of Defense? Elon Musk's firing put thousands of highly qualified people out of a job. Many of them possess security clearances and knowledge of the department's most sensitive program. Their service is vital to our national security. Thousands were fired without cause. Our adversaries couldn't be happier, and they may be profiting from those mistakes right now. These cuts come at a time when we are prioritizing, here in the United States Senate, funding to expand our nuclear triad and to counter China's growing nuclear capabilities. And these workforce reductions undermine our goals across the board in the Department of Defense. We need to provide personnel for program oversight, supply chain management, cybersecurity, other critical functions. And so I think we need accountability. We need the facts. They haven't been forthcoming. I object.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President.
Senator from,
So at some point, this has got to change. We have presidential elections every 4 years. Our president got elected. President Trump got elected whether people like it or not. He deserves the opportunity to put his team together and act as the president and put his agenda in place. This idea that both parties sit here and delay nominees, the ability to put teams together, doesn't make any sense for the future of this country. This is not a time there's no risk in the world. And so at some point, we're going to all have to come together and start accelerating this. We have so many nominees, whether it's a Republican or Democrat president, we have got to allow these nominees to get through and get confirmed in a much more expedited manner. Otherwise, we'll never, or none of our presidents are ever going to get in the position that they can never put a team together during their 4-year term. Thank you, Mr. President.
I hear from the other side is essentially give the president whatever he wants in the name of his having the prerogative, and he should name his own team. But we have a responsibility. It's a constitutional obligation. Advise and consent is more than just saying, give him his own team. If we'd been responsible in this body, if my Republican colleagues had stood up and spoken out as they should have done, we would have a different Secretary of Defense right now. It would have been unnecessary for the Vice President to come here and break a tie. We would have a more competent Secretary of Defense. That's the mindset that got us where we are today, and that is the reason that I have lodged these objections. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, let's remember what we just did today. This is not the confirmation of the Secretary of Defense. This is confirmation of very competent people. No one can question the competence of these 4 people. No one does. All right, these are competent people that have served our country, that will do a great job. So what we're doing is we're saying because some people don't like our Secretary of Defense, that we're not going to allow the president to put a team together of very competent people. So what we're doing is now we just have acting people that none of us get to vote on. None of us get to question until they come to committee. None of this makes any sense. It's not helping us put together a team and holding people accountable. So thank you, Mr. President.